Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Veg Networking Canada. We are a community where vegan plant-based companies connect and collaborate. It is important to honor, acknowledge, and respect that many of us are located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of many Indigenous peoples of Canada. Today, we have a special guest with us, a passionate advocate for healthy desserts, a champion for the ever complex cacao bean and all things chocolate, all with a deep appreciation for farmers and our environment. Veg Networking Canada is pleased to introduce the founder of Living Lotus. Welcome, Audrey Wong.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So, we're a group for vegan plant-based companies and business owners and entrepreneurs. So, can you tell everybody what led you to go vegan?
Okay, so we're gonna go back many years to when I was 12. um, so when I was 12, there was this big banquet for my grandfather, and he turned 70. And a delicacy, which I did not know, um, is squab, which is pigeon. And so they served us this little pigeon, and it just looks like a little like sleeping pigeon on a plate. And so I was like, this is like that's where the connection was made. Like, this is a thing that we're eating. Like, why are we eating this? So that led me to go vegetarian. And then over the years, in my 20s, um I would pop back and forth between like being vegan and not. And then what really hit was when I went back to school for raw vegan um, culinary and nutrition. And so I learned about all of the things that are in dairy and cheese that we should not be ingesting. And then, of course, like it always starts with the animals, right? So that's sort of when the change was solidified. And so I never went back.
Oh, poor pigeons, right?
I know. I know. So strange.
So now switching gears into your entrepreneurial spirit, your entrepreneurial spark, your entrepreneurial origins. How did that
So
unfold for you?
it's in my blood. I love to say, so my grandfather was a shoe repairman. He had his own shoe shop here on Main Street. So I'm based in Strathcona in Vancouver. Um, so growing up, he had his own shoe shop. My other grandfather in Hong Kong, he had a seafood wholesale business. So because I grew up in Vancouver, I didn't see him a lot, but it's always been sort of like my parents owned a laundromat when I was growing up. So it's just always been like a thing that makes sense, right? Like I've always seen it. It's always been modeled. I actually don't know anything else, right? Like my parents didn't have 9 to 5 jobs. Well, my dad he worked 2 jobs, but um, yeah, it's always just been a thing where it's like, oh, so you just go and work. Like that's what we do, right? We create our own something.
Now, did your something start with Living Lotus, or was it something beforehand? How did that go?
Yeah, so I used to and I still do, I'm a big sewer. So I had a business like back in the, let's say like 2000s, where I would make fairy wings. Yeah. So like hand sewn fairy wings. Very niche. And then I did have like a clothing company, but though it was, I would say that was more like a 20-year-old playing with the fact of having a business, right? Because I didn't know anything about business. Um, and back then things like Instagram weren't around, YouTube wasn't around, right? So it was very different. It was just like, let's make this thing and see if anyone will buy it, right? I put on fashion shows in the city with a bunch of other fashion designers, and it was all play. Like it wasn't a means to make money, though when you're that age, I think you think it is, right? So that's how I guess it started, and then cut to me loving desserts and wanting to provide a healthier option for people. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned fashion shows and the fairy wings or angel wings or what have you. It makes me think of an experience, like you said, like those wings or the fashion show and chocolate and maybe for a charity or something like what is it? The vegan fashion show. I think we've had guests on here before talking about that
Oh, cool.
business. So anyways, that's where my mind went. But going off of what you just mentioned about, cut to Living Lotus, tell us more. What is ethically sourced chocolate?
Okay, so ethically sourced chocolate is chocolate that is sourced from farmers and from farms where no humans or children are being used to procure the cacao. That's very different from vegan chocolate, and this is why. So, typically, what I find is, and I'm not going to paint a brush and say all vegans, but a lot of people that are making the switch, they just want the switch, right? Like they want the burger for the burger, they want the Kit Kat for the Kit Kat, they want the coffee for the coffee crisp, which is good, but it's also that just because there's no like milk or dairy in the switch, it doesn't mean that the cacao is ethically sourced. And people don't talk about that at all, right? Like they just think like, oh, there's no milk in it, so therefore it's vegan. But then we have to kind of pull back the curtain and ask your chocolate maker, where is your cacao sourced from? The other side, and I could go on and on and on about this, but the other side is that there are companies, big cacao companies, commercial cacao companies that have like a subsection that are like, well, these beans that we're using are are ethically sourced. But I'm not sure why, like it kind of doesn't make a difference because they're hurting people anyway. Like the other beans that they're growing, they do use human and child slavery, and they know this. Like they have a metric and they know it's out there in the open. So by having a like subsection that says like, well, these beans are like we're still supporting human and child slave labor by eating the chocolate from those companies. Um, it's a big problem. Excuse me. It's a big problem, and I would say if you're asking, how do we solve it? Ask your chocolate maker where your cacao comes from. There is a website called the Food Empowerment Project, and they have a chocolate list on there. Do you know about that list?
Yeah, I don't know specifically about the chocolate list, but I know about the Food Empowerment Project. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so they're really great because they're like, these are the chocolate companies we recommend. These are the ones we recommend a little bit. And these are the chocolate companies that we asked and did not respond. Right. And so, yes, there's like Rainforest Alliance, and there's also like fair trade. But don't forget, like the farmers need to pay money to be able to get those certifications. So that's less money out of their pocket. Right. So I feel like something more grassroots, like Food Empowerment Project, that are actually calling the chocolate companies and being like, hey, where's your chocolate come from? Like, who's growing your cacao? Do you have a relationship with your distributors? Like, I think that's much more important.
You're right. It's not talked about a lot. And you
It's
mentioned a lot there. And for me at least, maybe other people listening, you think of makes me think of, not to pick on any brand, but like maybe eating like a McPlant burger, but it's
mm,
still under the umbrella of, a brand that is doing a lot of injustice. So kind
mm.
of how you talked about. Now, curious is you mentioned, human animals, adults and children. Is there any concern that people should have about non-human animals being exploited in the procurement of cacao, or is it really focused more on human rights?
It's really focused on human rights because they don't, not that I know of, like when we're talking about organic farming, like that's the stuff that I don't know, right? Like how what they use to fertilize, like that side I don't know at all. So I'm not pretending to know that side.
No, yeah, that makes sense. I guess I was asking because I think it's coming to light a lot more now for folks how, monkeys being used in certain places to procure
Yes.
coconuts, right? So I was just
Yes.
wondering maybe that might be the same for cacao. But yeah, um, you bring up an interesting point because a lot of people will say vegan for the animals, forgetting that humans are technically animals. And so this is a very important conversation.
Yeah. I kind of just always want to shout it from the rooftops. So it's important, right? Like ethically sourced chocolate is we're not hurting any beings. Let's not hurt any of them. Like because we use our sweetener is coconut sugar. And so our coconut sugar is not picked by monkeys. Like I used to make a different product, a chocolate ganache, and it was basically coconut in every single form. But same thing, like we had to make sure that there was no monkey picking in any of that stuff.
Yep, yep. Now, a little bit of a curveball that you can handle this question in your sleep for sure, so I don't feel too bad about throwing a curveball at you. But what is the reason for the name of your company, Living Lotus?
So I wish I had a good story. But when I was starting the company, or when I decided, so when I got out of like raw vegan culinary and nutrition school, I was like, I'm gonna start a company and I'm gonna call it Living Lotus. Like there was no other like option. It was just like I'm gonna do this, but I also didn't know what I was starting. Like I didn't like I knew that I wanted to start a food company. I didn't know if it was gonna be like a meal prep company or like a personal chef company, but I have a massive sweet tooth. So at that point it was a raw vegan dessert company. So it made sense, like living as in living foods. And then the lotus is a symbol for like it's a symbol for a lot of things, but like um it is a symbol of rebirth. And so because I was switching my career over, um yeah, but there was no other option. In my brain, I was like, I'm starting a company and it's gonna be called this.
See, that's the cool thing about these types of questions and talking about business owners and things because you said you wish you had a good story. That is a cool story. It was like there was no other choice. Like it just kind
There
of
was no
kind of
other
came to
choice.
you, right? And yeah, when you talk about the rebirth and the lotus, somebody waking up, so to speak, to human rights violations or how cows are, violated with when it comes to traditional chocolate and making that switch over. Like that, there's a lot that so it makes sense for sure. So, okay, you mentioned one resource, which is pretty huge that maybe a lot of people don't know about, and that's the Food Empowerment Project. So,
Mm-hmm.
are there any other resources, books, podcasts, or apps that you'd recommend for other business owners or entrepreneurs?
Yes. So I listen to a lot of podcasts. Manifest by Kathy Heller is a great one. It used to be called, and it's changed a lot, but she started a podcast and it used to be called Do You Quit Your Day Job? And now she's rebranded into Manifest. Um, it's a great one. Um, this one's controversial, but I find a lot of value in it. This is how we market Gary Vee. He has some really great stuff. He teaches accountability, which I think is like to the younger generation, which I think is great. Um, marketing school is it's like a 3 minute podcast with Neil Patel and Eric Sue. And they have their own like big marketing companies. I don't know if you've heard of them, but marketing school it's just like a 2 minute snippet of like one day it'll be SEO or one day it'll be something else. I find value in those. Yeah, I would say those three would be the ones that I listen to and get value from.
That's so great. And Is there any other resources maybe that wouldn't necessarily speak to business owners or entrepreneurs, but more centered around like your vegan journey or anything related to that side of, your life?
No, I can't think of anything that would, yeah.
Okay. So, okay. Really loaded question for sure. So just putting that out there. Some people like framing it as giving advice. Other people like to frame it as, hey, this is some tips or lessons that, I've learned and might work for you. Take it or leave it. I'll share it with you kind of thing. But that's what this last question is centered around is, do you have any advice, tips, or lessons for business owners, entrepreneurs, whether they're already in business or maybe they're thinking of doing it? Like you said, you mentioned that podcast, quitting your day job. Do you have any advice, tips, or lessons?
I think the one, because when I read this question, I was like, well, I have a lot of like experience, right, over 10 years, but that's just like personal, like what works for me doesn't work for someone else, of course. But I think the one thing, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, and I think that you guys would all agree, is that you have to be a troubleshooter. Like that's actually the super skill of an entrepreneur. If you can't like look at a problem and go over it, under it, around it, or like figure it out, then you either need to hire that out, which is, I don't know that you'd want to hire that out if you were running the business, but you need to be able to troubleshoot, right? You need to be able to look at a problem and be like, how do we get through this? Like, so I guess it would be perseverance as well. Like, I think in the last 2 years, anyone that has a CPG company, um, as we're seeing, like just with like the economy, as you know, um, it's really tough right now because fuel surcharges, everything's higher. And so you just either need to find a way or you don't.
Now, is there anything that we missed in talking to you about, life in general, your business, anything like that that you want to discuss a little bit more? Anything that you want to double back to and, peel back some more layers on? Any announcements, anything like that? Just kind of leaving the floor open for you before we let people know where they can find you online.
Oh yeah. Right now I just launched our Valentine's Day flowers. So we're making 3 different flavors of flowers, and I don't do them like I only do them for Valentine's Day, and I only do them in small amounts. So we have like a white raspberry rose, a white strawberry peony, and a blueberry oat milk chocolate rose. And that's what we're doing for Valentine's Day.
That sounds delicious. All right. Well, thank you so much, Audrey. Everybody, you can find out more about these amazing cruelty-free, ethically sourced chocolate flowers and just the whole lineup of different SKUs and everything like that online. livinglotus.net, exactly how it sounds, livinglotus.net. And you can also stay more engaged on Instagram at Living Lotus Chocolate, Living Lotus Chocolate on Instagram. So this has been another episode of Veg Networking Canada with a great conversation with the founder of Living Lotus, Audrey Wong. Thank you for joining us, Audrey. Everybody listening, thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you soon on another episode. Take care. Bye for now.